And now joining us on Asia Prime to know further on the phenomenon, Mas Dede Prayudi, who's Executive Director of Center for Youth and Population Research. And we also have with us Mas Jayadi Hanan, Executive Director of LSI, Indonesian Survey Institute.
Oh, well, welcome to the show, Mas Dede, Mas Jayadi. Pleasure to have you all on Asia Prime. Mas Jayadi Hanan, what is the estimate number of young voters, the projection in the upcoming 2024 election, and how is it going to be different from the 2019 election, presidential election?
Yeah, based on the latest census categorized as the millennial and post-millennial generation will be dominant in 2024 election. It could be around 50 to 60% of the electorate will be the generation of Y and Z, or millennial and post-millennial. And of course, the biggest question is how are they going to vote? Because the behavior of voting of this generation will be a decisive factor for the presidential candidate determination. Based on the experience in 2014 and 2019, we did not see a specific pattern of voting behavior of young voters. Actually, they voted to all kind of candidates as long as those candidates can reach them through many ways of campaigning or many ways of reaching out to this young generation.
Very well then, Mas Jayadi. I would like to go over to Mas Dede. As Mas Jayadi said, no specific voting pattern from the young people. What does this mean for the upcoming presidential election in 2024?
Can you hear my voice first of all?
Absolutely, perfectly, perfectly.
Okay, right. I've collected some results from various sources, namely CSIS indicators, etc., or even IDN Times, for example. We have characterized young people's behavior or preference, etc., based on their characteristics, based on their concerns, based on their language. Talking about their characteristics, young people, young voters, they are quite political and cynical about politics itself. So the candidates should offer more politics of hope instead of politics of fear. That's the first one. And also the second characteristic is that young people, young voters, they're quite self-centered. They want you to speak their language. They want you to have a gesture the way young people also do have the same gesture. And also about the interest. They want you to like what they like. For example, the hobbies, etc. The second characteristic is that young voters are quite rational. They are more rational than the generation before them because their educational level is higher than the generation before them. And also they are more urbanized than the older ones. They have quite or relatively lower party ID. That means today they say they will vote for candidate A, but tomorrow they will vote for candidate B. So their loyalty to certain candidate is quite low compared to the traditional voters, their parents, their grandparents, for example. And because they're rational, they want the candidates to address their concern as well. What concerns are we talking about here? First of all, it's about the job creation. They want the candidates address this issue because this is what they This is what they issue that they care about the most. And the second one, coming from indicator from Mas Burhan, yeah, saying that Generation Z is really concerned about climate change, for example, because they're the one who's going to bear all the consequences coming from climate change. And the third one about their concern is digitalization. So, you know, because today's era is digitalized era, so the candidates should be literate about digitalization. And the last one is language. Yeah, this refers to ways of communication, the language, the gesture I was talking about before, the clothings, the hobbies like music, like sports, like gaming, etc.
Okay. Okay. Now, this question is also for Mas Dede Prayudi, but of course, Mas Jayadi Hanan, you can also answer this as well after Mas Dede answers the question. Now, of course, it's going to be very important to get the votes of the Gen Z, the millennial, in the upcoming presidential election. So I don't know if you guys have data on this right now, but which of the candidates right now is most popular among the youths and why? And which do you think will gain the support of the youth in 2024?
From what I know, according to, again, various researchers that we, whose results we collected, the three candidates are still dominating. Yeah, the first one is Pak Ganjar, of course. The second one is Pak Prabowo, and the third one is Pak Anies. So these three, I guess, are still dominating. But then again, they need to pay attention that young people, young voters, today they can say they choose A, but tomorrow they'll say they choose B. So, okay. So there's no such thing as security here.
Okay, so it's still unknown. Now, from Mas Jayadi Hanan, what is your perspective on this? Who is the most popular among the youth right now?
I concur with Kang Dede's explanation, assertion. As I said before, it seems that there is no specific pattern in terms of specific candidate that is being favored mostly by our young voters, particularly in the sense of Y and Z generations, as we have mentioned before. Top 5 of the presidential or possible presidential candidates so far, based on most of the credible surveys that we have, are Prabowo, Anies, Ganjar, Ridwan Kamil, and Sandi Uno. They are the top 5 during the last during the last 1 or 2 years, and our young voters are all over the place. For instance, many of them vote for Prabowo, many of them also for Anies, for Ganjar, and so we cannot say that young voter is now for specific candidate. Probably because several factors. Yeah. Number one, the election is still far away, and we don't have dominant candidates so far, just like in 2014 or 2019. So young voters, just like ordinary or general voters in Indonesia, do not have specific party ID, meaning that they don't have specific loyalty to certain political parties or certain political candidates. Therefore, they will be making up their mind along the way until the very end of the day of the campaigning. So that is probably number one. Number two, there will be no incumbent presidential candidate in 2024. That means the competition among the candidates will be competitive enough. And therefore, there is no dominant candidate so far who has, for instance, the electability around 30 or 35% so far. Number three, all of the candidates are aware that the decisive factor is the young voters. Therefore, since 2014 and until today, most of these possible candidates are having their own types of youth wing or youth way of reaching out to the young voters. So young voters are now being reached out by all of the candidates. So those are the possible factors that make our young voters are still not in favor of certain candidates. But of course, I think when the candidates has been narrowed down to, let's say, only three or only four, and when the presidential candidate has been official, which is around, let's say, 6 months before 2024 schedule of election, then we will probably see more specific pattern. But based on 2014 and 2019 election, I am doubtful that we will see a specific pattern of young voters in terms of their favor to certain candidates.
Very well
The
then.
other reason is that because most of the candidates that we are going to have so far are new generation in terms of political leadership, except for candidates like Prabowo.
Very well then, Mas Jayadi, Mas Dede. No specific voting patterns from the young generation, and then no dominant presidential candidate as of this moment, heading to the 2024 president election. So what kind of advice you both can give the presidential candidates if you are asked to beef up their strategy to win the hearts of the young voters? I will let you both gentlemen answer this right after the break. Welcome back on Asia Prime. Joining us is Dede Prayudi, Executive Director of Center for Youth and Population Research, and also Jayadi Hanan, Executive Director of the Indonesian Survey Institute. I'd like to continue with Mas Jayadi Hanan. My question earlier, how do you beef up the strategy when you have those circumstances towards the young voters? What advice can you give to the presidential candidates to win the hearts of the young voters?
Yeah, as the biggest chunk of the voters into 2024, so the candidate has no option other than reaching out to youth with all of the possible characteristic of their behavior or voting behavior, as mentioned by Kang Dede. Yeah, but for instance, young voters, just like the other voters, ordinary voters, they really care about basic necessities in human life, like job creation, education, insurance for their kids, and now the issue of health. Yeah, and of course, a more specific issue that is related to young voters is about climate change. That was mentioned by Kang Dede earlier. So I think my advice to the possible candidate is just continue their big effort in reaching out to young voters, because you will see that none of the possible candidates in which we have been seeing so far, none of them is ignoring the young voters. So they are trying very hard to reach out to young voters by, for instance, making the youth base of their supporters, by making a lot of activities related to young voters, and so on and so forth. So they have to continue doing that. So the key is that how to make a differentiation between the candidates which can be connected directly to the young voters. For instance, young voters does not really like the politics as usual. So they like the non-political political issues. So if you talk about the hard political issues like the power relation, the power grabbing, and so on and so forth, instead of policies, then it will be difficult to be accepted by young voters. But fortunately, I think most of the possible presidential candidates that we are seeing so far are aware of that, at least rhetorically speaking. The other thing they need to do is to prove that they have the track record in reaching out to young voters. And if you look at the top 5 or top 10 of the current possible candidates, most of them has two characteristics. One is they have been popular enough, and the second one is that most of them have the kind of track record that can be used as the evidence that they are doing something, not only speaking about reaching out to young voters.
All right. So, so you're saying that young voters don't like politics as usual, but of course, one of the strong names in the recent surveys has been someone who's been propping up in the last 2 presidential elections, of course, is Prabowo. Now, he lost twice against Jokowi, but he's still a very strong name. Now, I want to ask Mas Dede Prayudi, in your opinion, which of the candidates is strong enough to go against Prabowo, or is Prabowo the strongest one right now?
I would say the same thing as Pak Jai said just now, that I think Prabowo should probably change the way of communication. That before in the 2019 general election, presidential election, he used a lot of politics of fear. Politics of fear is some type of politics. You say this bad thing is going to happen if I'm not chosen, instead of saying this good thing is going to happen if I am chosen. So this such thing should be changed. And when we're talking about good thing is going to happen, then we're talking about politics of hope, politics of ideas. Then Pak Prabowo should then have very concrete ideas how to answer challenges or how to address concerns of our young voters. And talking about young voters, also Prabowo then should also address their concerns like climate change, as Pak Jai also said, job creation, and the last one is digitalization. That is currently quite happening because it is just the right time. Plus, the pandemics also force us to quicken the revolution. So all the candidates, presidential candidates, should address all these 3 concerns using young voters' way of communication, like the language, the gestures, the medias, the social medias. And the joke of youngsters is also quite special, because millennials, as I said before, they are very, self-centered, yeah? If you want to approach me, if you want me to vote for you, if you want me to care about politics, then make us interested, instead of, the older generation probably have this awareness that, oh, we need to vote because we just have to, because it's going to it's going to make our future, etc. But the youngsters, young voters, young people, they don't even think that political dynamics, the world of politics, is related to their life. So make politics related to their life. This is the hardest job that the current politician or the future politician coming in 2024 is going to face.
Right. So so you're saying there needs to be a change in communication, even from Prabowo, who seems to be still quite strong and popular in recent surveys. Now, I want to ask Mas Jayadi Hanan. In a recent survey, Ganjar Pranowo was also one of the strong candidates, just 1 below Prabowo. So can you tell us about Ganjar Pranowo and why he's popular, and will he stand a big chance?
Yes, Ganjar Pranowo is one of the strongest candidates, or one of the strongest among the five. Yeah, his strength, I think, is his performance as a governor of Central Java. That is one of his strength, but that is also one of his weaknesses, because as a governor of Central Java, of course, Central Java's voters, in terms of the number, is one of the highest. Yeah, the second highest, or the third highest after West Java and East Java. But the challenge for Ganjar is that to enlarge his popularity, his electability across the country, not only based in Central Java. It is different from Prabowo, who has been very popular among Indonesian in general, electorate in general, and also Anies Baswedan. Yeah, so those are the strongest three. But again, the strength of Prabowo and Anies is also their weakness, because they have been popular all over Indonesia. Their challenge is now to increase or to capitalize that popularity and transform that popularity into real electability, which is also a challenge. So I think those are some of the reasons why all of these candidates, top 5, top 3, are still, are still competitively compete with each other in the last 1 or 2 years of survey result.
Mas Jayadi, I would like to talk about pairing just a little bit. What kind of pairing, between the presidential and vice president candidate would win the heart of the young voters and guaranteed a win in the 2024 presidential election, Mas Jayadi?
Yeah, I think at least in the ticket, the presidential candidate and the running mate should be directly connected to youth.
Such as? Do you have that candidate?
Could be in terms of the age, could be in terms of their track record, and could be also in terms of the language of communication with the young voters.
Who has that criteria at the moment? Who has that criteria at the moment, and also a full support of a political party?
All of the top 10 seems to have mostly those criteria. Remember, the contestation of presidential elections in Indonesia is not solely determined by the candidates' popularity. There is one of the biggest factor is who is going to be nominated by political parties. Okay, because nominations of presidential candidate in Indonesia by constitution is only by political parties. That's number one. So we need to look at we don't really know yet what is the configurations of coalitions among political parties so far. Because only PDIP can nominate its own candidate. However, given the fact that PDIP's strength in terms of the size of the vote share they have, it will be, I think, most likely PDIP will also make a coalition. The question is, what kind of coalition will be created by these political parties, including by PDIP, will determine the pairings of the candidate. So far, I don't think they will open it up yet, because they will wait until the last minute.
Very well then. Would love to discuss further on this matter of pairing of presidential election candidates, Mas Jayadi Hanan, Mas Dede Prayudi. For the meantime, thank you for joining Asia Prime. Have a good evening.